Now it's my privilege to introduce our presenter. Dr. Pamela Reid is a certified applied animal behaviorist and currently serves as Vice President of the ASPCA's Anti-Cruelty Behavior Team. Dr. Reid received her PhD in psychology with a specialization in animal learning and behavior from the University of Toronto. She frequently lectures on shelter behavior, animal behavior, and dog training worldwide. She also trains law enforcement on non-lethal methods of handling dangerous dogs. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Reid.
Joining us today for this overview of how dogs communicate, both with other dogs and with us. By learning dogs' communication systems, you can better understand them and then better interact with them more appropriately. So this presentation hopefully will help you conduct more informative assessments, match make better, avoid bites, and provide a better quality of life for the dogs in your care. So in this first webinar, we're going to begin by looking at the whole dog, and then we're going to break that down and focus on the core pieces of the dog's message. And then in the second webinar, we'll compile the core pieces back into a coherent message by looking at the whole dog again. And at that point, we'll also explore other critical components of canine communication, namely vocalizations and olfactions. And then in the third webinar, you'll learn about actually handling the animals depending on what they're communicating. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to point out is the distinction between objective and subjective language. So describing behavior objectively is really the first step because it sets the stage for accurate interpretation. And what do I mean by objective language? Well, describing something exactly in terms of what's happening. So in this case, my dog barks and pulls on his leash toward other dogs when we're out for a walk. That gives you a picture, a description of what the dog actually does in what situation. So it's describing the specific behaviors and the actions, as opposed to subjective language where it says, my dog goes crazy when he sees another dog. So subjective language tends to involve personal feelings, opinions, as well as interpretations. Sometimes those interpretations can be correct, sometimes not so much. So it's important in the beginning to focus on the objective picture. Next slide, please. So again, you've probably seen examples like this. Subjective interpretation, this dog is guilty. Objective interpretation, this dog is signaling submission. So it's using the objective description, it increases information and clarity, it reduces judgment, bias, and misinterpretation. So by saying the dog is signaling submission, that's partially an interpretation. It doesn't go into all the specific behaviors that the dog is performing, but it is at least more objective than interpreting the dog's motivation. Next slide, please. So one of the things, though, that I already mentioned is that you still do need interpretation, because if you just specifically focus on objective language, then you end up with a list of behaviors. So in this case, the dog's ears are forward, the dog's tail is up, the dog is lunging forward toward the other dog. And if you just stick with that, then that may not help other people understand exactly what that combination of behaviors or body language means. So in this case, my dog barks and pulls on his leash towards other dogs when we're out for a walk. His bark is high-pitched and he bares all of his teeth. His behavior is consistent with defensive aggression. So that way, you get both sides of the coin. You get the description of what you see, and then you get an explanation of what you think that means. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus on 3 different channels of dog communication: body language, vocalizations, and olfactory signals. And in this webinar, we'll focus specifically on body language. And then the next webinar, we'll get into the vocalizations and olfaction. Before we leave the slides, though, I want you to look at this particular interaction and think about how you would describe those 3 different dogs and what you think that means. And over the next few slides, I'm going to be asking you that. I know you can't answer, or you can answer me, I can't hear you, but I'll give you a minute or two to look at the picture, figure out what you think is going on, and then we'll go to the next slide that gives some explanation. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. What can you tell about this dog by looking at this photo? Oops, next slide, please. I'm trying to do it myself and that's not working. Okay, so let's break this dog down. His ears, semi-erect. His eyes, to the best that we can tell, are pretty natural looking. He's clearly looking at something. His mouth is open. His tail is pretty natural and relaxed looking, and his weight is fairly well balanced. So given that he's looking at something and his ears are erect, we probably assume that he's alert, he's paying attention to something, but he's still relatively relaxed. Next slide, please. What can you tell about this dog? I'll give you a second to take it all in. Okay, next slide. So here we're looking at a dog who, again, is definitely looking at something. And in this case, his ears are very forward. His brow is wrinkled. His eyes are fairly natural. They might be a little wide. His mouth is closed. His tail is raised. And his weight is either balanced or slightly forward. So again, this dog is also alert, but he seems a little more interested in whatever's going on than the previous dog. So he's potentially a little more aroused. Next slide. What can you tell about this dog? Next slide. So here we have a dog that body is crouched, his head is lowered, his ears, to the extent they're drop ears, but they appear to be lowered. His eyes are pretty large and round, and even though his body is lowered, he's looking up at something. His mouth is closed, and he's leaning away. So these are all indications that this dog is afraid of whatever he's looking at. He's definitely nervous. Next slide. What can you tell about this dog? Next slide, please. Okay, now we have a very different picture. This dog is looking directly at something. His ears are back, mouth is closed, but in this case, there's a little more tenseness there. The mouth looks like it might be slightly puckered. The tail is a little hard to see, but it appears to be raised a little bit. And again, also a little hard to see. The weight appears to be shifted forward a bit. And in this case, it's a little fuzzy, but the hackles are up on the dog's rear. You can't see its withers, but definitely on the rear. So we would interpret this that the dog is about to threaten whatever it is that she's looking at. Next slide. So it's interesting, there's been a little bit of research looking at how people interpret body language in dogs. And I guess it's not surprising that people are less adept at recognizing negative emotions, particularly the subtle signs of negative emotions, than they are at positive emotions. Also, the good news is we do improve with experience. So just keep that in mind, that we're more comfortable with the positive side of things than we are with the negative. Next slide. So these are two labels, fearful and submissive, that often get used interchangeably, but they are distinct. So I wanted to bring this up in the very beginning. you see the same dog in two different photos. And in one case, the dog is showing fearful behavior. And in the other case, the dog is showing submissive behavior. How do you tell the difference? Well, the dog in the photo on the left, he's being touched, and the dog is afraid of being touched. So what you tend to see is you see non-social behavior. The dog is not actively engaging the person. He's looking away. Again, a lot of body language that's consistent with fear, with the ears down, the body is crouched, eyes are big, although I think this dog's eyes are big anyway, no matter what, and the dog is leaning away. And this kind of behavior you will see either in the presence of animate or inanimate things. So it might be afraid of a thing, or it might be afraid of a person or another animal. But still the behavior is non-social, and the dog is motivated to get away, to move away. In contrast, the dog, in the same dog on the right, this dog is showing submissive behavior. So even though some of the things look the same, the dog's still, the eyes are big, the ears are down, they're down slightly differently. The dog's body is small. But in this case, you only see submissive behavior in the context of social interaction. So it's very likely that a person is approaching the dog in this case. So you're only going to see it in the context of interacting with people or interacting with other animals. And typically a submissive dog is more motivated to approach. Or in this case, this particular dog, maybe not approach, but you could conceivably imagine that this dog might flip upside down as the next behavior. The other thing that is consistent with submission is that paw raise. So I just wanted to point that out because sometimes when we look at these pictures, we can't tell if the dog's being fearful or submissive because we don't have the whole picture. We can't see everything. Next slide, please. So like I said, the body language is very, very similar, and really the only way that we can distinguish is on the basis of context and other behavior. Another indication that often comes through with this is a fearful dog probably isn't going to be wagging his tail. Highly unlikely that there'd be a tail wag. Whereas with submissive dogs, often there's a low, fast tail wag as a very good indication. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit more about dog-dog dynamics because, again, we're likely to use the phrase or the label submissive in the context of dog interactions. Next slide. So this is a slightly controversial topic about dominance and submissive, so I thought we'd address it right at the beginning before going into more detail. There's nothing inaccurate about speaking about dominance or submission when it comes to social animals. Almost all social species, or species that live in groups, adhere to some sort of hierarchical system that allows animals to interact together, particularly over resources, without the need for aggression. So in other words, any kind of dominant subordinate hierarchy that exists in a social group, it functions to reduce the incidence of aggression. That's the purpose of it. And it is a perfectly normal behavior. We don't understand it very well when it comes to domestic dogs. We don't know how well it maps onto other social species, wild species that we study, but we do know that they show those signals. Some individuals and some breeds more than others. We don't know at all how that translates into their interactions with people. We really are in the dark when it comes to that. But there's nothing wrong with using these terms, but it's very, very important to recognize that these are not characteristics of an individual animal. There's no such thing as a dominant animal or a submissive animal. Those terms are in relation to an interaction. A dog may be dominant in its interaction with another animal, or it may be submissive in its interaction with another animal. But the dog itself, that's not a personality trait. They may be confident, which means they might be more likely to show dominance in an interaction. or they might be lacking in confidence and possibly behave more submissively. That's not necessarily true. I don't want to say that that's true, but I'm saying that there are personality traits that could potentially relate to this. But the important thing to recognize is that it's inaccurate to say this is a submissive dog or this is a dominant dog. It is always in relation to an interaction. Next slide. One of the things I neglected to say is that in terms of body language, though, when we talk about dominance and submissive, they are pretty much the exact opposite of each other when we look at the behavior, at the body language. So a dog displaying a dominant posture in relation to another animal is highly likely to have erect ears, direct gaze, a high stiff tail, and an upright body. They often will draw their body up to appear as large as possible. They may even stand on their tiptoes. Whereas a submissive dog is much more likely to have its ears back, have an averted gaze. His mouth may be open or closed, depending on the circumstances. Usually the tail is low, and usually the body is small, sometimes hunched to appear as small as possible. And again, as I mentioned, you'll often see a raised paw. So in the pictures here, you're seeing a dominant-subordinate interaction between these two dogs. The dominant dog is actually doing a chin over where it appears to be pinning the other dog down. However, the other dog has voluntarily positioned himself in that passive submissive posture. So the submissive dog in this interaction positioned himself on the ground, and then the other dog came and placed her chin over him as though to control him. Next slide. So having heard that, this is not a dominant submissive interaction, obviously, but can you tell which dog is more confident in this interaction? Certainly they're both gazing directly at each other. Both have forward weight distribution. And I'm seeing a lot of mixed responses. I think this is interesting. They're clearly both showing their teeth. Neither one looks very pleased. But if I had to put my money on one, I'd put it on the dog on the left. And it looks like a lot of people are saying left. Both dogs have their hackles up, though. It may be harder to see with the dog on the left, but they both do have their hackles up, and they both do have their tail raised. What's the big clue for the one on the right? That paw raise. I would say that tells you everything. That dog is prepared to retreat if necessary. And if you didn't notice it, the reason why they're making these faces at each other is that there's a bone behind the black and white dog. So this is an altercation over a resource. Okay, next slide. We're going to look at a video now. And this video came from YouTube, and it shows an absolutely fascinating interaction between two dogs over a resource. You can see there's kibble on the floor. I can watch this video over and over and over again. I think it's absolutely fascinating because of the incredible body language going on there. And you usually don't see that combination of confidence and deference in a dog. That dog on the left was incredible because it was clear he did not want to engage in an aggressive interaction. He was motivated to avoid that at all costs. But if you watch carefully, you'll see the first sign of deference in the dog on the right at about 7 seconds into the video. So let's play it again. You have a chance to watch again. Watch the heads of these two dogs. Right there. See, the dog on the right just turned his head slightly away. And that gave the dog on the left permission to, well, I didn't say permission. That was the cue at which the dog on the left took the step forward. I don't know about your dogs, but mine are not usually this brilliant at communication. Yeah, and there's somebody made the good point that nothing is happening quickly here. Everything is going very, very slow because fast movement could potentially trigger aggression. So it's all very slow. Yes, there were teeth on the right hand, on the dog on the right. He's not happy about it. But... Brilliant video. Okay, let's move on. Next slide. So another area where people can sometimes experience confusion is in the context of play. And that's because play is made up of behaviors from all sorts of other motivational systems. So you get aggressive behavior, you get dominant behavior, you get appeasement, and you even get sexual behavior, all rolled into one. And so play is really hard to define. It's usually easy to recognize, but not always, and especially if the play is tense at all. You can see a mixture of behaviors that can be unclear, where you're just not entirely sure if one or both dogs are playing or what's going on. And that's especially true if you're looking at photographs without the whole picture. But next slide. The one thing to recognize is that if you are looking at a play interaction, you're likely to see play bows, not always, but you're likely to see play bows where the one dog goes down into a bow position. You'll often see brief timeouts and also moments of stillness. So it's like they're giving each other a break in the combination of a high tense situation because they are displaying all these behaviors that normally would be associated with tense interactions. The one thing to realize, dogs don't always show role reversals or they don't always handicap themselves, so that's not a good indication of whether or not it's good play or not. Some dogs do those things and some dogs don't, but it's not a necessary condition. Really, the only surefire way to know if a dog's play style is acceptable to the playmate is to pull them apart and then release the playmate and see if he comes back for more. So that's really the telltale sign of whether or not the dog is having fun. If he wants to come back and engage that dog again, presumably he's enjoying himself. Next slide. We often hear of a play face, particularly in primates, but dogs do tend to have a play face as well. The musculature of their face will be very relaxed. Typically, they have an open mouth and very soft eyes. Next slide. Another behavior that you see in the context of play is mounting. It's not only in the context of play, though. So you see mounting in the context of play. Obviously, you see it as a sexual behavior, but it can also be just an expression of non-specific arousal. And it can occur in the context of a dominance interaction where one dog is attempting to dominate the other. Mounting is not an indication of something bad happening. It's what dogs do, and that's the same whether they're mounting people or dogs. It can be any one of these contexts. And I saw somebody say something about stress. I would say that falls into the category of non-specific arousal. So it could be related to stress, but it typically in that situation, if it's not one of these other things, it's going to be some sort of expression of arousal. Next slide, please. So as we've already talked about in terms of these examples, dogs rely on their entire body when they communicate. So when learning to read dogs, I think it's really helpful to first break these apart into the component pieces and focus on very specific features. And that would be the eyes and the ears and the tail and the mouth and the weight distribution. So these are all pieces of the puzzle. And then you combine those pieces to put together the whole picture, or you can think of it as these are analogous to our words, and then they get combined into sentences. So let's talk about eyes. Next slide. Focus on eyes first. We've already talked a little bit about, okay, that dog is looking directly at something or someone, and then we've also talked about the shape of the eyes. So those are two things to pay attention to. Next slide. You often hear the term soft eyes, and basically soft eyes means that the dog is relaxed. There's nothing that's arousing in that situation. So these are two examples of dogs with soft eyes. It's going to depend on the shape of the dog's eyes, though. They may be naturally round anyway, or they may be almond shaped. Either of those shapes are appropriate, but they will have that soft appearance. Next slide. Some people talk about squinty eyes, and a happy, relaxed dog can sometimes look like they're squinting their eyes. And it's probably because they also have a wide open mouth at the same time, and so just by happenstance, their eyes end up squinting, but typically that's a good sign. Next slide. Then we have hard eyes, obviously, in contrast to soft eyes. And you'll see up here, I've got proceed with caution. So when we talk about hard eyes, it's because the face is tense at that point. So the dog may be narrowing his eyes. He's usually very focused on something and often staring directly at something when you see those eyes. So it's something that you definitely want to heed. Next slide. You've probably heard the term whale eye as well. And in the context of whale eye, what's happening is the sclera of the eye is becoming visible. So the dog has turned his head away, but he's still looking at the target of whatever it is he's concerned about. So in this case, the dog is not turning his head towards what he's looking at, but he's turning his eyes towards what he's looking at. And typically that's an indication of tenseness or discomfort. Next slide, please. There's another example. So the dog is definitely paying attention to something, but is unwilling to make direct eye contact. So that right there is enough to give you an idea that it's something you just want to pay attention to. Next slide. Fearful eyes. When the dog is fearful, typically their eyes are going to be unnaturally wide. The pupils may be dilated, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and the gaze is often directed upwards, and usually that's because the body is lowered, so they happen in concert. Next slide. So I said that pupils may be dilated, so any highly aroused dog, whether it's aggressive or fearful, those pupils are often dilated, but be aware, pupils also dilate if the dog is in dim light, so you have to be aware of the context. And my thinking is, if it's not terribly practical to rely on pupil dilation as a cue of whether or not you should be worried, because if you're close enough to the dog to see his pupils dilate, you're already in trouble. So, so I like this picture because you know, it shows very clear contrast in the behavior and the body language of these two dogs. The dog on the left is definitely averting his gaze, his body is lowered, whereas the dog on the right is direct eye contact, super dilated pupils, and then showing his lovely weapons. Next slide, please. So moving on to ears. With ears, we're going to be looking not only at the position of the ears, but then also at what they're doing, whether they're moving or not. Next slide. Ears are a little more tricky because obviously there's much variation when it comes to ear posture in dogs anyway, so how they naturally sit. And you'll have prick ears and semi-prick ears and drop ears. And the dogs, particularly with the drop ears, you know, if they're very droopy, they are less likely to show much movement. So it's harder, can be harder to read those dogs. And then of course the dogs with the prick ears, it's a little harder to tell if they're alert because their ears look like they're alert all along. Next slide. We do deal with dogs, obviously, that have cropped ears, and if they have the real extreme crop, they can move the base of their ears. You just have to watch a lot more closely to be able to interpret what's going on. Next slide. It's important to know as well, dogs can move their ears independently. And it's something like in this picture, the dog is looking at one thing, but she's listening to something behind her. And so that can be important to note because it might be an indication that this dog is on a higher level of arousal. He's vigilant to something. So again, important to just take note of these things. Next slide. So when it comes to position, you have to know, or at least be able to look at the dog and interpret what a natural position is. So, so in this case, this dog is relaxed. Next slide. This dog is clearly alert. His eyes are erect and forward. This dog probably has prick ears anyway, but regardless, they are very forward oriented. Next slide. Sexy ears, that's my favorite. I suppose we should have sexy around, or the sexy in quotes because it's not really a scientific term, but sexy ears are very distinct because they're usually very erect, but they tend to be back. So particularly in this dog, his ears, he has prick ears anyway, but they're erect. So they're erect, but they're twisted back. And then these ears are going to be accompanied by all sorts of other courtship behaviors, including a high, fast tail wag. In this case, the dog's tail was moving so fast, it's blurry on the photo, and other forms of courtship behavior. When this behavior is directed towards a person, it can sometimes appear, it can be misinterpreted because it can appear pushy and assertive. And so people may not recognize it. It's often accompanied by pawing or nose poking or even licking. Yeah, hump ears would be another good way to say it because typically that's the intention of the dog is to move into that phase. Okay, next slide. Now when we're looking at dogs that are showing aggressive behavior, it's a little harder because typically the ears are not going to be in their natural position. But they could be pulled back, they could be flattened, or they could be forward. Pretty much anything but natural goes when it comes to aggressive responses, and they're pretty much specific to the dog and to the motivation for the aggression. Next slide. Fearful ears tend to be pulled back. So whatever their natural position is, even if they're pricked, they're going to be pulled back as much as they can, and possibly even flattened against the head. Next slide. This is my favorite, another scientific term, airplane ears. Typically, if you see the dog with his ears out, like airplane wings, that's probably a dog that's indicating submission. And again, note the tongue here. And we're going to talk about the significance of the tongue sticking out later, but just to take note of it in this situation. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to look at a video, an interspecies video that shows a great interaction between two animals when you pay attention to their ears. Cat's got great airplane ears. An example of two animals that are dying of curiosity about each other, but are also very uncertain. It's a cute interaction. Next slide. Tails. Again, tails. We're looking at position of the tail and whether or not the tail is moving. Next slide. So natural position for a dog. Some dogs have naturally high set tails. So anything that we're talking about with tails is relative to their natural position. And tail position and wagging are complex aspects of dog body language and often can't be interpreted, again, as strong indicators of likely behavior unless you see the whole picture. Probably the exception to that is a dog with a tail that's tightly tucked between its legs and or pulled up under the body, which almost always indicates a very frightened dog, unless it's a whippet, in which case that may be their natural tail carriage, but probably not that tightly tucked. And then also a dog that's showing a loose tail that's wagging rapidly, or even like the full body wag. That's a pretty good, reliable indicator of friendliness. Next slide, please. So this is a brief video, and I want you to contrast the tails of these two dogs. So these are two dogs that don't really know each other, and one dog is clearly showing more confident, assertive body language. His tail is up and curled over his back, very erect. The other dog in the initial part of the video showed that lovely helicopter tail. His tail was just going around and around, indicating a positive emotion, consistent with social behavior, solicitation of interaction. And then when the black and white dog reacted aggressively, the pit bull type dog went into a more submissive type posture, where his tail went down and his body got small and he moved away. Next slide. So how do you tell the difference between a dog that's afraid or a dog that's submissive? Again, there's a lot of overlap between these. But a submissive tail is less likely to be completely tucked, typically because it's usually going to be accompanied by a low, fast tail wag. Whereas a dog that's afraid, highly unlikely he's going to be wagging his tail. But again, it's hard to tell necessarily based on just a photograph without getting the full picture. Next slide. Tails are a really good indication of a dog's arousal state, so for whatever arousal means, but it does mean you should be paying attention. So the dog on the left is mildly aroused, the dog on the right, highly aroused. So a high set, stiff tail is consistent with high arousal. May not be aggression, but definitely is arousal. If that tail is moving stiffly and slowly from side to side, that's called flagging. And that can be more indicative of an aggressive motivation, but not always. I'm going to show you an example in a minute where it doesn't necessarily. It can also be consistent with solicitation or courtship behavior. Again, typically the tail is going to be wagging faster if it's not an aggressive flagging. Next slide. Here's a cool example of the same dog showing 3 different tail postures. So in the left, it's a natural carriage. In the middle, it's a fearful carriage, and in the right, it's an aggressive response. And notice that you can, even though you tend to see piloerection in the withers and the back end of the dog, in this case, the dog's hair is erect on its tail as well. Next slide. This is a proceed with caution dog. There's a lot of things going on there, but certainly that tail is stiff, upright, and tense, and the whole picture of the body is tense. Next slide. Okay, here's the next video in this interaction between these dogs. So again, pit bull type dog is felicitous, submissive. Black and white dog showing much more confidence. And here you see that little fast wag. Even though his tail is upright, there's a little indication that he might be willing to be friendly. And then he closes his mouth. Dramatic differences in their body posture overall. Next slide. Okay, mouth. Talking about the mouth. There's a lot of stuff going on with the mouth. You've got whether or not it's open or closed. You've got the position of the lips. You've got what it's doing. Is it yawning? Is it lip licking? All those things are important. Next slide. So in general, an open mouth indicates a relaxed dog. Whereas if the dog is focused on something, he's much more likely to close his mouth. So you can often see the dog be just hanging out, and then he sees something that catches his eye, his mouth will close. Next slide. We often talk about the commissure of the mouth, and the commissure refers to the corner of the mouth where the upper and lower lips meet. And I put a picture of a hound on the right. They tend to have droopy flews or lips, and so they can sometimes be harder to read when it comes to interpreting what the mouth is telling you. Next slide. A fearful dog, that commissure is going to be tight and pulled back into what we call a fear grimace. And obviously, an indication of defensive aggression. You want to proceed with caution. Next slide. When the commissure is tight and pulled forward, we say the lips are pursed or puckered, and that's much more consistent with offensive aggression. Let's look at a few pictures here of faces. I realize we're running out of time, so we're going to do this fast. So take a look at this dog and think about what you see. Next slide. So here you can see her eyes are gazing directly at something, ears are flat, head is a little bit lowered, face is clearly tense, the muscular is tense, and that commissure is forward. That's a threat. That's telling you, oh, she's very, if you could hear her, she's very likely growling. Next slide. What has changed? Next slide. Well, certainly the commissure has moved a little bit forward, so it looks even more pursed, and the head has lowered even more. So she's escalating. Next slide. And now what has changed? It's a little more clear, not subtle at all now. Her weight has shifted forward more, her face has become more tense, and now she's showing a wrinkled lips and a tooth display. Next slide. And finally, what has changed here? The threat has become even more intense. Her eyes are even wider. She's now raised her ears a little bit. Oh, sorry, thank you. Her Her head is raised even a little bit more, so she's more threatening in her posture, and the commissure is even more forward, and now she's clearly showing all of her front teeth. Next slide. You've probably seen dogs show a submissive grin. Some dogs, not all dogs show this, only some, and when they're signaling submission, they will retract their lips and show their teeth, and that can be a point of confusion for people sometimes, but this is definitely not an aggressive display. Next slide. And some dogs will even retract their lips and show their teeth when they're hot and they're panting really heavily. So it's very important always to take the whole context into consideration. Next slide. We're almost done. So yawning. Yawning can be informative. Maybe not though. This dog is probably just sleepy. This is a relaxed, sleepy yawn. Next slide. How is this yawn different? What indicates that, other than the fact that the dog is sitting and not lying down, what else would indicate that it's not a relaxed, sleepy yawn? Next slide. So I would say one of the things to look at is that the yawn is very exaggerated. The dog's face is tense. Obviously, the ears are up, which are not necessarily consistent with sleepiness. This dog is anxious and agitated, actually, and without knowing the context, it's hard to know. But this dog had its dinner dished out, but then left on the counter, and this dog wanted to eat, so we got a nice stress yawn. Next slide. You can see dogs pant when they're nervous and stressed as well. This dog is at the veterinary clinic and she's nervous. So you see a pant, but a pant, again, doesn't necessarily mean anything. You have to look at the whole dog because the dog could simply be cooling himself off. So this dog is mildly fearful, body is hunched, she's leaning away a little bit, her tail is almost tucked, and her ears are back, and she's looking up. Eyes are a little bit big. So a fearful dog may pant nervously. It usually will be combined with trembling or stress yawning as well. Next slide. Lip licking. So we mentioned a couple of examples now where you've seen the dog sticking his tongue out, and sometimes that can be combined with a lip lick, and sometimes it's just an extension of the tongue. Typically, the lip lick is an indication of stress, but when they extend their tongue out and just hold it there, it tends to be more likely to be an aggressive response. It typically happens in the context of them showing their teeth as well. Next slide. And the last thing to talk about in terms of the puzzle pieces is the weight distribution. Whether the dog is balanced in his weight, whether he's leaning forward towards something or pulling away towards something. I want you to look at this picture. This is a really fascinating interaction between these two dogs. You see the dog on the left, even though her head is lowered, she's gazing directly at the dog and her weight is forward. The dog on the right, you see, the dog is very upright, forward ears, high stiff tail, but the dog's not looking at the dog on the left. His gaze is averted and his weight is ever so slightly shifted away. So given that I know these dogs and I know the interaction, I know quite clearly that the dog on the right did not intend to meet the dog on the left in this cramped situation where normally he would avoid the dog on the left. He's stuck in a situation that he shouldn't be in and he's saying, oh crap. Why doesn't he just submit? I mean, he could make himself small. He could hunker down on the floor. Probably the reason he's not going to do that is because if he moved, movement pretty much trumps everything else. And if he moved in this situation, if he moved a muscle, it's highly likely the dog on the left would aggress towards him. So his best strategy is to remain still, don't look at her, and just hope that she keeps moving. Very important lesson for people too. If you find yourself in a situation like this, in a tense situation like this, and the dog is too close, it's best not to move. It's best to just very slowly, if anything, just avert your head. Try not to trigger anything to happen. Next slide. Here you see the same dog. In both cases, the dog is fearful, but in one case, he's shifting his weight backwards, and that's because he's very close to a person. And in the other case, he's leaning forward, and that's because there's something that's attracting him, even though he's afraid of it. Next slide. And I mentioned already the hackles being raised, piloerection. So the important thing to think about that, you want to pay attention to it. You want to notice it, but raised hackles does not mean the dog is aggressive. Try to think of them as like goosebumps. When we get goosebumps, typically that's an indication that we're aroused, stressed, something. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be aggressive, but it does mean that we should pay attention. Something's up. This is another example of the aggressive dog showing his teeth and protruding his tongue. Next slide. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the concept of conflicted or ambivalent behavior. Often you get a whole bunch of mixed messages, and it's hard to really know how to interpret it because there's so much going on. This dog is showing a lot of mixed signals. His weight is leaning away, his head is down, his ears are back, but his tail is upright. I should say his body is leaning away, but it's also leaning forward. So it's kind of side. He could go forward or he could retreat. He's really in that mixed stage. Definitely hackles up, so he's aroused by something. So he's very much conflicted between fight or flight. And I can tell you the story behind this. He's being threatened by a swan, a very large, aggressive swan, and he doesn't know whether to attack it or whether he's going to be attacked. So typically in this situation, if the animal is experiencing mixed motivations and one motivation is not overpowering the other, at any point in time, something could change to alter that, and either the dog will move forward or move back. Okay, next slide. I'm going to show you an example of this kind of conflict behavior.
Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Come on. Come on. Marianne's gonna come and eat for me. She's gonna come and eat it for me. Come on. Good girl. Good girl.
Hi, Pretty.
Come on, told you.
No? Oh, but you like to come out?
You want to come?
Come on, let's go.
Come on.
Let's go out.
Come on, let's go. Good girl.
Good job, Marianne.
Good girl. Almost. Almost. Oh my God, it's so close. It's
You
so
can do it.
Close. Oh my God.
You can do it. Okay. Good job. Oh, so close. Oh, yes, yes. Good job. Oh, you can do it. Okay, well, don't do that. You want to come out? Come on. Come on. You can do it. Come on. Oh my gosh. Oh, so close. This is killing me. Come on. Oh my God. Come on. You can do it, don't you?
My fabulous leashing skills.
No, this is good. Good for her.
Good girl. Come on.
You can do it.
Good
Yay!
girl.
Now you can come out.
So it's a lovely example of a dog showing a lot of conflict, and then you gradually see the motivation change. The motivation to come out gets stronger and stronger. She's more willing to approach. She's more willing to let the person move her hand towards her. And then eventually, and then once the leash is on, there's no more conflict. Then she's fine. So we've reached the end of this section of looking at all the pieces of the dog. And next time we'll put all those pieces together to interpret the messages. So I think we have a few minutes for questions. I'm sorry, I went a little longer than I intended.
Yeah, and while you guys are gathering questions, I am going to start a poll that we ask our attendees to fill out super quick, just 3 questions, and it will just help us to understand your experience with this webinar. So go ahead and enter in those questions. And it actually seems like our poll is having some technical difficulties. So we'll just stick with questions for now, especially because we're almost at time.
Yes, Pam, we had a couple questions about the video you just showed. Some questions about what you might do to encourage this dog to approach you, and what role, if any, the second dog in the video played in this process.
Well, certainly what I would do would depend on what my motivation was at the time. In this case, I believe they were helping to teach the dog that she could come forward and that nothing horrible would happen, and that in fact something good would happen. And for this dog in particular, I know that she was motivated by food, but she was very highly motivated to interact with other dogs. So that other dog was serving as a social buffer, a motivation to help her overcome her fear of either the person or coming out of the kennel. If I had needed to get the dog out quickly for some reason, I would have done something quite different. I would have turned my back, kneeled down, very slowly, cautiously backed up to try and noose the dog at that point, also again with treats and or with the other dog. But in this case, there was no urgency to get the dog out. It really was to teach the dog that this is an okay thing to have happen.
Thank you. Another question related to the tongue sticking out in an aggressive dog and what that means.
I can't answer that. I don't know why they do it. I just know that it often happens. And it seems to be particularly when they're stationary and they're threatening and they're showing their teeth. Certainly a full frontal tooth display. But the significance of it in terms of evolutionarily speaking, I have no idea why that would be a behavior that dogs show.
Okay, it looks like we have another question here. The opposite of approaching the fearful dog in the video we just watched. What are some tips for approaching an aggressive dog? Well, I assume that's something that will be covered more in the third webinar.
But typically, when you're dealing with a dog that's aggressive, you want to, again, be non-confrontational, but not put yourself in a vulnerable position. So you need to be much more defensive in your handling. And without going into a great deal of detail, it's hard to explain that. But certainly, I would be much more likely to have my foot on the door so that the dog couldn't come blasting through. I'd be sticking the noose in, the slip lead in without my whole arm or body as well to protect myself. And then again, using any kind of enticement that the dog might like, as well as speaking in a friendly voice to the dog. Those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you.
Are we at the end of our time?
Yes, I'm going to send us back to Madeline.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who came to our webinar. Be sure to sign up for part 2. It's available through our ASPCA Pro site, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much again for showing up.